Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, joined by attorney Stephen Jessup, and we're going to talk about heart disease and can you collect long-term disability insurance benefits if you have a diagnosis of heart disease. Steve, there's all different types of heart conditions cardiac disease that a person can be diagnosed with, and this is one of the unfortunately, the classic type of cases where diagnosis does not always equal disability because of the fact that heart disease is so prevalent amongst people working throughout the United States, throughout the world. Heart disease is a worldwide problem that people suffer with, especially as we get older. And we've seen every gamut of these types of conditions, from congenital defects of the heart that people are born with and live with throughout their lives, from coronary heart disease to heart attacks and things like that. And so I want to provide in this video some of the issues that people should expect with cardiac disease and provide some tips that will help people, whether they've been denied or they're considering applying, to put them on the best path to get their benefits approved. So when a person first calls you with a heart disease type claim, what is in your mind initially in terms of what you're going to need to do to prove this claim for them?
First thing in my mind is what is the diagnosis medically? What's your history? Have you had histories of heart attacks, having stents, heart surgeries? Because the more severe the condition, the more the insurance company is going to give it more weight and give it more, credibility into approving the claim. So it's really knowing what the underlying problems are, the history, and then also what the person does for a living. Obviously, if you have a very bad heart problem, you do physical work, that's a cleaner nexus to try to draw, as opposed to maybe someone who does, sedentary work. Like I've represented people with severe, heart problems who are, computer programmers, dentists, things along those lines. So it's kind of first and foremost having an understanding of the person's medical history, because generally if you do have a heart problem, you do have a pretty extensive medical history up to that point where you think that, hey, I need to file for disability.
In a lot of the cardiac cases we see, obviously the objective evidence is not often contested. Rather, it's the subjective complaints are not supported by the objective evidence. And that line of text that we see in almost every denial letter that we get is really misleading and borderline fraudulent in my mind, because there's no measure of saying you have this heart disease and therefore you should be in this much pain or have this much cognitive decline. It varies with every single person, and that's the area that the disability carriers always take advantage of. So how do you recommend a claimant overcomes the basically the requirement of proof to show that they are limited by their heart disease and can't commit to the 8 hours a day, 5 days a week required of their job?
I think a lot of ways it depends on the job itself. I think that's where you learn to really focus on what you can add to the claim to show why, because of this condition, you can't. Going back to the example of someone who has a physically demanding job, when they can't even finish stress tests, that's indication of physical decline, the inability to have the endurance to be able to complete the work. I've sent people to functional capacity evaluations in that standpoint too, to show how the fatigue sets in and extrapolated over a 40-hour work week. There's no way they could do the physical nature of their job. On the flip side of that, as you alluded to with cognitive, a lot of people with severe heart conditions also start to develop cognitive problems. And I have had clients that have undergone neuropsychological testing that indicated that the decline in the ability to concentrate and function and handle, these cognitively demanding tasks and jobs were impacted on account of the medical heart condition as opposed to some other type of problem. So it's really knowing the context of what someone's occupation is, what the demands of that job are specifically, and then figuring out what's going to be the best testing or additional information to support why you can't perform the material and substantial duties of your specific job.
And the other thing, Steve, I have in almost every single heart disease case that I deal with is the fact that the doctor always says avoid stressful situations. And it's undisputable that work can be stressful. Not all the time, but not everyone goes to work and loves it and has the best time. When they get there, work is stress, and almost everyone agrees that you're going to encounter some type of stressful situation within work. And we've worked with psychologists and neuropsychologists, and there's tons of published medical literature out there that stressful environments will have a negative effect on a cardiac condition. And when people get into stressful events or situations, they immediately have physical manifestations where they obviously have elevated heart rates, syncope episodes, things like that. And so there are physical symptoms that develop, and there can be exacerbations of your cardiac condition. But the disability carriers often say, look, that is how your job does, and we don't necessarily believe that you need to avoid those stressful situations in order to do your job. So how do you articulate that basically this job can't be done without avoiding stress, number one, and number two, staying away from the fact that saying avoiding stress doesn't mean you have a mental nervous condition?
Well, it's hard because the insurance companies, like you said, argue the possibility of you having this negative reaction to work in and of itself is not a disability. So that's where in presenting that, it is difficult, and that's why I think a lot of times, when you are talking about, stress, the physiological aspect, you do have to stay away from the mental health component because they will try to pigeonhole you there. And I think it's really a matter of those, like I said, those other potential testing, whether it be the neuropsychological, the functional capacity evaluation. The FCE especially will, elicit stress response from a physiological standpoint. So you can use that to show, listen, if they can't get through a test, a physical, realistically not that strenuous at the end of the day test, for 3 hours without having physiological responses that are indicative of a problem, increased heart rate, perspiration, like all these issues. And you'll see in reports, person became lightheaded, testing had to stop. Well, you can take that and show, well, listen, if they can't do this in a controlled environment, they're not going to be able to manage this in a workplace setting. And then it also comes down to, too, this idea of, maybe they do it one day, or are they going to do it, every day of the week? Are they going to be able to work with a reasonable continuity and perform those job duties? So if your whole disability claim is based on your doctor saying you need to avoid stress because you have a bad heart, that's going to be a hard sell to an insurance company. There's got to be a lot of other things put into place. So if the doctor is making that statement, you have a body of objective evidence to the best of your ability to show this is why you can't, this is what happens when you are in those situations.
Right, and there's so many different scenarios we've seen, from the people that have had heart attacks and can't get back to the work capacity that they had, following those events, cognitive difficulties, fatigue, things like that, side effects of medication. I've had lots of clients, and it always blows me away, where I have a client who has an ejection fraction rate around 25% or less. Disability carrier approves them initially, leaves them on claim for 2 or 3 years, and then has some doctor review the records and says, well, your ejection fraction rate hasn't gotten any worse. It's staying around the same. I don't see why you can't go back to work. And that blows me away, because you approve the claimant for 2, 3, or 4 years. The one I just handled was actually 8 years for an OBGYN of all types of occupations, who they say, well, your ejection fraction rate's been the same for a while, and we think you can go back to delivering babies when you haven't been in the OR or doing any practice for 7 or 8 years. But the point is that heart condition's a chronic medical condition that doesn't necessarily get better over time. Unfortunately, it's a condition where your heart gets worse over time. So I'm always blown away by the carriers who think after a period of time that your heart condition is cured and you're now ready to go back to work. So what is the best thing that a claimant can do who's on claim and wants to avoid a denial to keep themselves from being denied?
I mean, if you're handling your claim yourself, I think the best thing you can maybe do at that point is consult with an attorney and, discuss the case. Think about what the long-term perspective is, whether it's hiring an attorney and to manage it, reviewing the medical, because at the end of the day, it's really what the medical is going to be. And like you said, if there's no improvement, insurance company will still at some point say, well, you stabilize, so you should be okay. So the best thing you might be able to do at that point is really consult with an attorney, just get a better idea of your policy, how your policy works, what the pitfalls may be for your specific insurance company, and then really evaluation of your medical records to kind of make sure that you still all have your ducks in a row to be able to continue to be able to make a strong argument that you haven't gotten to a point, even if there is some level of improvement, but you haven't gotten to a point or a level of improvement that would see you being able to return to full-time employment.
Right, and I think the most important thing that you were talking about was in the medical records is you got to stay on top of your medical records, because in these claims, your claim is only as good as the manner in which you look on paper. And to really dumb it down, if you don't look messed up on paper, if you don't have the objective evidence, if you don't have the complaints in your medical records, then the disability carrier at any time is going to find a reason to deny that claim. So your claim's only as good as it is on paper. Unfortunately, the treating doctors treat the patient and not the chart, and the doctors aren't great at documenting everything in the records. So when the disability company gets the records, they cherry pick out the information that they think supports the basis for a denial, and they also state what's not in the records, even though you probably have those symptoms and functional limitations. So we really work closely with you and your doctors to make sure that all of these things are in the medical records. We also make sure that you're going to get the appropriate diagnostic testing and any other kinds of functional type testing that's going to help support your claim, which you were speaking about earlier, Steve. So in summary, if you have a claim, we'd be happy to provide you with a free initial consultation. That involves reviewing your disability policy, or if you've been denied, reviewing a copy of your denial letter. We're going to let you know immediately whether or not we can assist you. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to help you, and we make it a very easy process just through you giving us a call or emailing us your information. Lastly, I encourage you to take a look throughout our website, search by your company or search by your occupation or medical condition. You're going to find lots of summaries of lawsuits and cases throughout the country, reviews about your company, and lots of tips through articles and videos that we've done that we believe are going to help you with your claim no matter what stage it's at. So we look forward to the opportunity to speak with you in the future, and we'll be here should you need us. Thank you.